Hello and welcome to another edition of Your Money, Your Life, our Black Enterprise series on all things wealth building and financial wellness. I'm your host, Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior Vice President and Executive Editor at Large for Black Enterprise. And this episode of Your Money, Your Life is being brought to you by Prudential. Today, we're talking about a very important subject, and we have a very special guest to have this conversation. First, let me introduce our guest. Joseph V. Samples III is a financial advisor with Prudential Advisors in Southfield, Michigan. 25 years of experience. This brother has a lot of wisdom, a lot of expertise, and we're going to do our best to pick his brains during the course of this segment. And the topic we're talking about is really a critical one as we close out one year and enter another. We've all been through a lot of things, the pandemic, economic fallout from that, and even just personal issues in your own family. But it's very, very important that you really focus on either establishing or rebuilding your emergency savings fund. We're going to talk about how do you do that. Joseph, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. I am excited to be here with you today and have the opportunity to talk to you about your money, your life, and all the topics that you bring to the good people. So I'm just glad to be here, grateful to be here. Thank you.
So I'd like to spend a couple of minutes getting into a little bit about your background. I understand you got 25 years in the game, that you're very, very focused on helping people get the kind of the foundational budgeting issues stabilized before you move on to building toward the goals that they have set for their lives, their families, whatever they're trying to accomplish. Talk to me about how you came to the profession and your approach as a financial advisor.
Great question. Thank you for asking. How I came to the profession, I actually graduated from a business school here in Michigan called Northwood University that specializes in the business career. And I had a good relationship with my professor in college in my senior year. He was the econ professor, as a matter of fact. And he introduced me to a gentleman at the time who was working for another financial services firm, interviewed with the firm and got in and hadn't looked back. A lot of people have asked me, they said, did you go to school wanting to be a financial advisor? I did not. I actually wanted to go to school to be in the business. But funny thing, you may or may not recall, and I'm probably dating myself saying this, but I was very drawn to the movie Wall Street. You may recall back in the day with Michael Douglas, and that got my attention. And lo and behold, my econ professor introduced me to somebody in the industry, and I said, that's what I want to do. And so here we are today. And so I'm so grateful to do or have the opportunity to do what I do. I've learned so much from my clients over the years and have had the opportunity to turn around and pour it back into others. Because when we talk about wisdom, true wisdom is gained through experience. But I've been able to gain through the experience of so many other people to turn around and help others in the process. So that's what I'm grateful to do.
Well, I always say wisdom is like all forms of wealth. It's of no value if it's hoarded. It's only a value if it's poured into other people. So
that's great. I got to take that one. That's great.
You got it, bro. Share it. And I'm minored in economics. My degree, people that know me well, but a lot of people don't, is actually in art. I'm a trained visual artist, but most people think I went to school for journalism. But I'll say I majored in economics only because I was about to graduate from college during a recession. And my counselor was like, if you're not going to grad school, you need to have a tougher, more job-ready minor or major. So I changed from psychology to economics, not knowing that someday I would end up at Black Enterprise. So, look at God. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, look how it all worked out.
That's right, exactly. So listen, I'm as a financial journalist, as a person, I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a financial planner, but of course I spent 30 years talking to experts like you about wealth creation, wealth management, managing money. And one of the critical things that's really important is having this emergency fund. And I call it not just an emergency fund, I call it an opportunity fund. And I'll get into that, as we get deep into the conversation. But it's basically, for our audience who may not be totally familiar, it's 6 to 12 months, and you'll give me your guidelines for what it really should be, of money on hand, cash, easily available, strictly for emergencies. And I know for me, it was a critical resource during the pandemic when there was lost income. I did not lose my job, but income was cut back. I make a lot of money public speaking. Of course, that went totally away. And I had the luxury, the blessing of this emergency fund to draw from to carry me through. And it's not always a pandemic, But whether it's the car breaks down that you need to get to work, you do lose your job temporarily and you need to be able to make ends meet till you get your next one. It is a critical feature of financial planning that I think a lot of people either just think they can't put together or they take it for granted. And the reason I also call it an opportunity fund, I tell my friends, I said, when you have that business idea and you think, oh, but if I just had $1,000 or $2,000 to get started, it's nice to know I got this fund that I didn't know if I was going to need it, but I could take advantage of this opportunity to make more money from this money that I put aside. So I tell people, don't just think about it from a negative standpoint. It's also could be a positive standpoint. So what's your take? I mean, I'm just a person who writes about finances. You are actually a financial expert. What's your take on how people should think about the importance of having an emergency fund?
Well, first and foremost, my take is amen to everything that you said, because everything that you said proves what the purpose of money is. Money is a tool, and it's a tool to be used for certain situations or certain circumstances. So for the context of our conversation today, which is talking about that emergency or opportunity fund, it fulfilled the purpose of what you put it there for. The emergency was a global pandemic that you didn't know about that affected your ability to earn an income. However, your preparation in building that emergency fund allowed you to maintain and sustain your standard of living without going into debt. So one of the things I think a lot of us need to realize is that life is full of unexpected events, things that we cannot plan for, things that we do not expect. So whether it be a global pandemic, the hot water tank at home goes out, there's a leak in the roof and you got to pay the deductible on your insurance. A lot of us will have high deductibles, so we keep the premiums low. Whatever it is, an emergency comes up, unexpected things happen, and cash is king. One of the things a lot of people approach me about over the years is when they come in, they say, I want to invest, I want to invest, I want to invest. And one of my very first questions is, how much do you have in cash reserves? Because if we're going to build a financial empire, we have to start with a strong foundation. I look at it this way. I have a friend of mine who's in contracting, and he and I were having a conversation one time, and he mentioned that a lot of people marvel at the height of the skyscrapers that are across this country. But we have to realize, as tall as the building is as deep and as strong as the foundation needs to be. And then when he said that, it just hit me in a certain way. And it's the same way with our finances. People want to come in and start off with, I want to buy a stock. And I say, well, how much do you have in the bank? And there's no money in the bank. It just doesn't add up that way. We can't build until we establish a firm foundation. So as you stated, you are correct. As a rule of thumb, 3 to 6 months of your committed expenses you should have in a cash reserve position. And the reason why a lot of people have asked, they say, well, how do we choose 3 to 6 months committed expenses? Just as you stated, if in the event there's unexpected work stop, we can actually still cover all of our committed expenses, the mortgage, the rent, the car insurance, you look at utility payments, all those things can be covered without having the additional stress. It's already a stressful situation that there's a pandemic, or there's already a stressful situation that I've been laid off, or maybe even a short-term disability kicks in and my disability insurance doesn't activate right away, but I still have to cover the bills. So what that emergency fund does is it allows us to maintain during periods of unexpected things that actually happen in life. And because of the transientness of our society today, I've heard some experts saying, which I don't disagree with, maybe even 8 to 12 months of committed expenses. But you got to start somewhere. So even with people who have not established an existing reserve, we focus on, let's start with trying to build up at least 1 to 2 paychecks. We got to start somewhere. And that's the thing that I believe is that some people get turned off too when you start talking about 6 to 12 months of the committed expenses, especially if they're starting at zero. I said, well, let's start with just at least banking a paycheck and figuring out how we can actually set that aside so you do have some emergency funds. Because if you don't have them, what ultimately happens, that unexpected event comes up and we end up turning to debt. And debt is what actually prevents us from being able to build the financial empire that we want to build up.
You know, it's one of the things that you say, and I know you get it, and as a financial journalist, I get it. When people find out that you're some kind of financial expert, however you got the expertise, the first thing they want to know is where to invest, what's the stock I should buy, should I get into Bitcoin, what should I do? And I'm always like, you're trying to start to build from the penthouse. And what you're talking about, I tell people getting out of debt is the basement of the building. You got to get out of the basement. And then you got to lay the foundation, and that's your emergency savings. Then you got, your are you fully vested in your 401k if you have access to one? Do you have your retirement plan? But don't go straight to the penthouse. And you're right, people, don't have, a month's worth of reserves in the bank, but they're ready to buy the next Amazon because they,
Yep.
but no, you can't start at the penthouse. You gotta build wealth from its foundation and build it up. So I love your friend's analogy about the taller the building, the stronger the foundation needs to be.
You got it. You got it. And it's not uncommon. I mean, as you mentioned, people approach you and ask that question, but I was surprised at a survey that was actually done according to bankrate.com. It was actually done just in July of this year. So we're talking post-pandemic or in the midst of the pandemic as we still are. But they stated that 51% of Americans have less than 3 months of emergency funds set aside. So that's literally, if you got 10 people in a room, half the people in the room don't have an emergency fund. It's just kind of the situation that we're in right now. And it's definitely something that I think that's why this conversation is important. I think that what you do is important because we need to continually raise the awareness and share with people that there are some simple things you can do to help build that foundation, especially if you're looking to grow your financial situation and build it up.
Hold that thought right there, Joseph, so I can just deliver this important message. Prudential knows the importance of having a rock in your life. Everyone needs a rock. A rock can help you turn the far-fetched into something within reach. And when you have one, you can reach your potential, your dreams, and your goals. And when it comes to your financial goals, Prudential is the rock you can rely on. With their knowledgeable financial professionals, Prudential can help you get to new heights. Plan, invest, insure, retire. Visit Prudential.com. Who is your rock? And I know a lot of people are glad that you're their rock, Joseph. Let's dive right into it. Okay, let's say I'm coming to you. Maybe I have a little cash reserve. Maybe I don't have any cash reserve, or maybe I did have one, but I depleted it, over the last 18 months as we're still navigating life in a post-COVID world. But now it's the end of the year, and I really want to hit the ground running to begin to establish and rebuild those emergency funds. Now that many of us are back to work, many of us, our businesses are either launched, or we're at least back into earning mode again after being shut down for a very long time. What are some of the things that you would advise people to do as actionable steps they can be taking as they come into the new year to begin to establish this emergency fund?
Great question. The first actionable step for everybody, regardless of what stage in life, financially speaking, you're in, whether you're a student that's just graduated from college, first-time income earner, to being a middle-aged wage earner and you're planning for retirement, or even being a retiree, no matter what stage you are in life, financially speaking, everybody needs to have a budget. The reason why a budget is important is because it helps you identify what's coming in versus what's going out. And it doesn't matter how much money you earn. If you earn $3 million a year, which a lot of people say that's a lot of money, some people might say it's not a lot of money. But if you earn $3 million a year and you spend $3,200,000, you're in debt. You've spent more than what you brought in. So a budget is key. A budget is critical. And the reason why I say is starting with the budget, because for the person who says, I'm struggling with building a cash reserve fund, and you're working and you're earning income, but you're not able to set the money aside, we have to figure out where the money's going. How do we figure out where the money's going? It starts off with a budget. So the first step would be identify what's coming in, what's going out. And where a lot of people get tripped up when it comes to saving, they try to save after the effect. What I mean by that is they try to save after they paid the expenses. What we actually need to do is we really need to make yourself one of the primary things that you pay. Pay yourself first. If you look at most 401k or retirement plans, they are, for most individuals, not all, most individuals, the largest investment most people will have. And the question is why? Because it comes out before the money gets in their hands. And guess what? To build your cash reserve, you can do the exact same thing. Most people nowadays receive their payments electronically. So whoever it is that's paying you, they'll send the money directly to your bank account. We'll give them our banking information. And my recommendation would be, instead of having all the money go to one account, go back to the source that's sending you the money, give them information to create two deposits. So you get a split deposit. You have money going to your checking account, wherever it is that you handle most of your household expenses, but we get a predetermined dollar amount out of every paycheck to go into that reserve fund. Even if you start off with as little as $15 to $25 a pay, start, let it come out before it goes into your hand. And that way you're doing it automatically, so it builds up over time. And then ultimately, as we work on the budget and we free up and figure out where more cash is coming from, we can increase the amount that's going to that reserve fund.
Automation, and it's something that our parents and our parents' parents didn't have access to if they were trying to deal with this. You're right. Whether you go to your employer and give them two separate banking information, or in my case, my bank, I have an automatic sweep to another account that doesn't have a debit account card attached to it, doesn't have a checkbook attached to it, so I don't get tempted to let me draw for that, and it just automatically goes there. And the magic of that. Just like the IRS, you pay your taxes to the IRS because they're not asking you for it. It just goes, and you kind of forget about it eventually. You think of your take home as your full compensation. So I tell people, when I'm saving, I'm not thinking about saving because the money just goes there. And and if I need it, I can look to see what's there. But I'm not. If I had to trust myself to say, let me write this check to go into this account, we know what happens. We think of reasons not to do it. So that automation is key. But you're like, but if you don't budget, you don't know that you have. I tell people, when most people say they don't have money to budget or money to save, and they say they don't have a budget, I'm like, well, then you don't really know what you probably have the money. You just don't know that you have the money.
Exactly.
It's so important. So I've established this automated system, whether it's with my employer or I just do it for my own account, and I established $15, $20, $25. Toward just getting started, because that's the key. Don't think about the 6 months or the 9 months or the 12 months. Think about, like you said, one pay period, and then two pay periods. Tell me about, I'm going to throw this one at you. I don't know if this is one of your tips. I tell people, and I tell my kids and all my mentees, always look out for the windfall, what I call found money. I was like, you're always going to get money you didn't expect from somewhere.
Right.
And my rule is, if I get money I didn't expect, 50% goes toward emergency savings. Reducing debt. 25% goes to emergency savings, and then 10% goes toward tithes. In my case, probably yours too. Then the other 10%, I blow it. Whatever, candy, gym, golf, whatever. I reward myself. But my thing is, it's important to have a plan for money you don't expect, because often we spend that money before we got it. Even though it couldn't have been in the budget. We didn't know it was coming. Right. If we anticipate it, it's a great way to boost your emergency fund. And when I was first replenishing my fund, I just put all my found money into the emergency fund. I tied the other 90%, put it in the emergency fund. Now, I don't know if that has been part of your experience with your clients, but I always tell people, there's money you didn't expect to happen. That's a great way to jumpstart your emergency fund.
Definitely is. And one of the things, especially as we're coming out of this pandemic situation, it's not happening so much today, but for a lot of people, there was some found money in the stimulus checks. Mm-hmm. And what occurred is during the pandemic, I talked to quite a few of my clients, and what happened is that their discretionary spending went way down because they weren't able to go out, they weren't going to concerts, they weren't traveling. And I would talk to them and they would say, man, I got all this extra money sitting in my bank account because I haven't been spending it. And to your point, I've said to them, sweep it to the savings account, build up the reserves. But at the same time, even the stimulus money that's come in, I've talked with clients over the last year and told them, let's take that additional money, to your point, pay down the debt. It's no need to actually continue to carry debt, and you have additional money coming in. But what I heard you say and what I stress to my clients is that with a budget, a good budget, every dollar that comes in has a predetermined destination. So meaning that you already, I heard you say it, so that's great. You already have a tier, a hierarchy of where the money's going to go. And ultimately what that does, when you have a good budget, like you said at the end, you said that 10%, you just spend it on whatever. Well, that's what we call guilt-free spending. I've talked to so many people over the years, they say, well, I had this extra money and I blew it and oh, I feel so bad. Well, again, if you had a predetermined destination for where the money's going to go, yes, it might be a little bit less on the back end, but the discipline of saving makes it where even if you blow that money on whatever you choose to do with it, you took care of business first, business before pleasure.
Mm-hmm. In the time we have remaining, what would be, I want to kind of focus this question on the mental, emotional relationship we have with money. You know, I mean, it is about financial.
Yeah, we only have a few minutes.
Yeah, I get that. I'm sure you got stories and fables, man. I'm sure you do. But I know from my own experience, I was raised in a working poor household in a working class neighborhood, and my relationship with money had to change once I made it to successful middle class professional life. And even now, I'm realizing it has to change again if I'm going to move toward my goal of really understanding, even as a financial journalist who knows this stuff, that there's a different mindset from when you're talking about wealth creation on a broader scale, multi-generational wealth creation. But I know a big challenge for people who say they can't really establish an emergency fund is this kind of mindset of scarcity and lack. And I tell people, you can actually live on 90% of your income. You really can. You can live on 80% of your income. You know, and I say that when I tell people you can tithe, you can have 10% for savings, 10% for tithing, and you actually can live on 80% of your income, but it's about your mindset. Talk to me about how important part of that, how important that is as a part of your advice to people, our audience now, who are struggling with this idea that they can begin to build an emergency fund.
Great question, great point, and everything you stated, I agree with. It all starts in the mind. I simply believe that we have to renew our mind in order to be able to do the things that we want to do. And I believe a statement as well is that where the mind goes, the body will follow. So if you first believe you can do it, you can do it. But when it comes to money, the relationship we have with money, a lot of people have to understand that money makes a great slave, but it's a terrible master. And there's a lot of us out here who are serving money. And when we find ourselves in that situation, that's when we feel like we can't tithe, or we can't build an emergency fund, or we feel like we're chasing all the dollars. Well, that's again where the mindset has to change. And the only way you get control of your money is first by sitting down, renewing your mind, and establishing a budget. Once you then establish a budget, you can then again tell your money where it needs to go. You and I talking today, it sounds easy. I have no doubt. I've seen it over the years. It is not an easy process. I want to say that word again. It's a process. So just because you sit down today and you write out your bills, which I think is a start, which is great. A lot of us have what I call a bills list, meaning that we got a paycheck coming up Friday. I'm writing out what I'm going to pay. That's a bills list. But what about the money that's left over? This is where the budget gets tricky. This is where we have to predetermine the destination. So again, having a budget, sticking to a budget, revisiting it on a regular basis. And that's where the process comes in, is that for a lot of us, especially married couples who you have dual income households, I like to say the best way to prevent financial stress in a marriage is to have a preset time, a preset day to discuss household finances. So that way you can get on the same page, figure out where the money's going. The same for an individual who may be single. You need to have a time where you sit down and review your expenses, what's due, what you're going to pay, where the money's going. So again, I have to just go back to a budget is the best way to do it. There are many online applications. There's apps on our phones nowadays, or you can even use an Excel sheet, but do something to get started to get control of where the money's going. That's the first thing in order to change the relationship where you're not serving the money, but ultimately to get your money to serve you.
Now, I'm going to give my number one piece of advice that somebody gave me when I was younger that I wish I had followed when it comes to this topic. I was told, bank your raises. Meaning, if you've been used to living on $30,000 a year and you get a raise to 35, keep living on 30,000, at least just for a year. Let that extra money go into your savings and then upgrade your lifestyle. Because like you said, whether somebody's making $3 million a year or $30,000 a year, what usually happens is the reason why we're in debt is because we're chasing lifestyle too. As soon as we get a little bit more money, we upgrade our lifestyle. And then next thing you know, we feel just as poor as we did before we got the raise. So that's for me. I'm like, if I tell my kids, if I had banked my raises every time I got a raise, not forever, but for like 3 months, 6 months, a year, man, my kids be like, yeah, you could have done a better job, Dad. I was like, yeah, you're right. I missed that one. But anyway, I always like to give that piece of advice because it's so easy if you're intentional and you have a budget, as you say.
Correct. But the thing that you just mentioned is that is a small step that goes a long way. And you know, there used to be a saying, it's the little things that count. It applies just in this particular instance. And so that's even also one of the tips too that we have with our clients is that you do an automatic annual increase to your savings. Small amount. Even if you start at $25 a month, we go the first year, you do $25 a month. Well, guess what? We want to take it up to maybe $30 a month the following year. You might not think that $5 is that big of a deal, but over time, it pays huge benefits as you incrementally increase the amount that you're saving, whether it be into your cash reserve, whether it be into your 401k. And really, that's where investing comes in, because saving is where we talk about establishing the foundation, the emergency fund, the opportunity fund. Investing is where we build, and where investing comes in, it's even the incremental increases in the interest you earn over time. Compounding interest, which I know is not for today's topic, but hopefully we could talk about that in the future. But that is something that also pays huge benefits over time. But in order to benefit from compounding interest, you got to have money that's there first and foremost.
Listen, man, like you said, I'm going to have to bring you back. I have to bring you back for another show. You are everything I was told you'd be. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show. You're giving our audience some great tips. Great starting point or building point if you've already got a fund to build that fund up. If you're already at 3, you can get to 6. If you're already at 6, you can get to 9. And I love your point. Then you reach that magic threshold where your fund is fully funded, but now you're used to taking this extra money. You can say, well, I don't need to put this in the fund. Now I really can start building, looking into investing. I can start saving for capital for my business because I got this fund to the side that I know that if something goes left, I got a cushion to ride it out.
Right.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for being a guest on Your Money, Your Life.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate our time together today. Thank you.
If our audience wants to connect with you, ask more questions, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's currently my only social media feed. I've been told by my kids I got to upgrade my social media, but also I have a webpage, joseph.samples@prudential.com, that I can be reached at as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joseph.
Thanks for having me.
And this is another edition, a great edition of Your Money, Your Life. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior Vice President, Executive at Large at Black Enterprise. This episode has been brought to you by Prudential. Thank you for joining us.